Hello everyone, my name is Will. Welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about ADHD and social struggles that are associated with it. In the neurodivergent community, when it comes to social struggles, most people immediately think to ASD, but ADHD has a huge amount of social struggles, and I have had quite a lot of them throughout my life, and I find it really odd that no one really talks about them that much. A couple of these I think are pretty common, but a lot of this stuff I've never heard anyone say before. I think it's going to be really interesting to hear what other people have to say about these things, because I think it's good to spread awareness, and also we're learning so much about ADHD all the time. You know, even just 10 years ago, when I was in therapy for it, it seemed like therapists really just thought that it was a focusing thing and not much else than that. But now we know that no, there's a lot more going on in our heads than we originally thought. So I have a list of 5 things that I have dealt with in my life that have been probably the most prominent when it comes to social issues. And of course, not everyone is going to experience these things. I'm really not sure how common a lot of this stuff is, to be honest, but I am completely sure it's due to ADHD. The first social problem that I have had due to ADHD, and I think this is probably the most common one and the reason why I put it at the top, is lacking social skills due to an inherent lack of interest in learning how to socialize. This is something that I know I dealt with a lot as a child. For this specific issue, I would say this was really mostly when I was a child, like maybe up until the time I was a teenager. I just really didn't have social skills because I wasn't interested in learning them. Like the only things on my mind were hyperfixations or just whatever I was doing at the time. I really did not care because in my mind at the time, I was very individual, I guess you could say. I really did not like having to blend in with other people. I really did not like having, especially stuff like, like business talk, learning how to talk formally and serious. I hated that stuff. So, when I was told that I had to act serious or I needed to learn how to be a bit less like immature, I guess, I really just wanted no part of it. And the thing is that when you are a young child, you can more or less get away with that because there's plenty of other kids that are the same. So really, I just associated myself with other kids that had no interest in growing up either. So for number 2, this kind of ties in with number 1. I put these two together for a reason. So this was pretty much after I became a teenager that this was a problem. The issue that I had was that now that I was a little bit older and now that everyone around me was maturing, I wanted to start fitting in. I wanted to start acting a little bit more mature just because I noticed that I was drifting away from a lot of my friends because they were growing up and I wasn't. So I really was pretty determined to learn how to socialize. The problem with that is that I was physically incapable of focusing on doing that. When I turned about 13, 14, I became physically incapable of focusing on just about anything that wasn't stimming or my hyperfixations. I was literally physically incapable of it. And it sounds extreme, but I'm not exaggerating. This drove me insane as a teenager. So I would be at home before school, trying to imagine these social situations, what I would say, kind of, prep myself so I wouldn't look awkward. But then I would actually get to school. And then once I would be in those social situations, my mind would just be completely blank. I couldn't tap into it. If I was alone, it seemed like my brain worked fine, and I was able to think things through. But it was the second that I was around other people, my brain just physically wouldn't work. I spent several years trying to figure out what was causing that because it was so bizarre to me and I had never met anyone else with the same problem. And that was a thing that took a really long time to improve, and it's not perfect now. I think it does tie into number 3, which is lacking impulse control. This obviously affects us in many different ways outside of socializing, But I think in regards to socializing, it's more or less the stop before you speak skill that everyone else seems to have. I would just blurt things out. And I know that that's a really common thing for people with ADHD, but like it was kind of a stim thing almost. Like I couldn't even control it. Like I would blurt out like random noises and stuff. Even like in high school I would do that. I just like couldn't stop, you know what I mean? And I would just say the most random of things. But the thing that affected me the most in social situations was the fact that it felt like I was not physically capable of stopping before I said anything. That little bit of time you have after someone asks you or says something to you, and you're able to like think about what to say before you say it, it seems like that little period of time is either non-existent for me, or it's very blurry and I need a lot more time to think of my answer to something. And as a teenager, I didn't know how to manage that, so I would kind of just say whatever. It really did feel like nothing I ever said made any sense. And I still have this sometimes. At some point last year, I was at a party. One of my friends was saying something to me. I don't even remember what he was saying, but I think he said like the number 40 like came up in the sentence, and I just said 40 back to him. It's like the cogs are like messed up and not moving. To add even more to this, there were many times as a child, I would be in conversations with people about like even something that I was interested in, where it could have just been like whatever, but I would just blurt out factually incorrect statements about what we were talking about because I couldn't focus on the conversation enough, or like I couldn't, it's not even that I wasn't focusing on the conversation, it's like I couldn't get into my brain enough to like come up with a proper answer, that I would just blurt out something random. I did this all the time. And this created a lot of social issues because people looked at me as like a compulsive liar because I was just saying the most random thing that came to mind. Because again, it really did feel like I just lacked the ability to think before I said anything. And I just cannot emphasize that enough. For number 4, another reason why I struggled socially was just not feeling like I was on the same wavelength as other people. I don't know why I said was. I mean, I'm definitely still not, but it was a lot more of a thing when I was younger. So like the biggest thing I will say with this, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier in the video, that especially growing up, really all I did with my time was focus on my hyperfixations, or I was stimming. I did nothing else. And when that's all you're doing and the people around you are kind of like growing up or whatever and getting into like different hobbies, or if there's like things that are like becoming popular, like with kids your age, you know, there's kind of like a social expectation to participate. And because of the fact that I never did that, or at least I tried to sometimes, but it never worked because I didn't care, I definitely stuck out from other people just because I was like constantly out of the loop on things. And like people would try to like talk to me about like stuff going on or just anything, and I just would have nothing to say because I didn't know what they were talking about. Because again, I spent all my time doing my hyperfixations or stimming. When I was like 14, 15, I really wanted to get into more popular things just so I would have something to talk about with other people. But something that I noticed was that I just hated popular things. Like I hated them. Like it was to a level where it became like just irrational. Like I was irrationally angry when I thought about things that were popular that other people were doing. And I think that there were multiple layers to that. I think a big part of it was just that I was frustrated that I couldn't get into those things because I wanted to relate to people, and it was extremely frustrating to me that everyone else seemed like they were able to do it, but it's just I didn't know how to use my brain. I think that's the best way to put a lot of this stuff, is just that growing up, I didn't know how to use my brain. So like I was not really capable of getting into something that I wasn't immediately inherently interested in. Like nowadays, like if someone recommends me a show or something, like I can watch it and enjoy it. But back then, if someone recommended me a show, I would watch the show just so I could relate to my friends and have something to talk about. And I wouldn't really be paying attention to the show at all when I'd be watching it. In my head, I would just be like kind of giddy thinking, oh, I'm going to have something to talk about. And then I would realize I didn't focus on the show at all. And then I would have to like look up Cliff Notes for it because I would have nothing. I wouldn't have absorbed anything in the show. You know what I mean? And I feel like I was always into kind of like obscure, weird things. So it just really, it was hard to find other people that were interested in the same things as me. And also, like, how do you talk about stimming? I mean, there's not many layers to it. You just kind of do it. It's just a basic activity. It doesn't really spark much of a conversation, especially with other kids that don't do that. You know what I mean? So for number 5, and the final thing I'm going to list in this video, I think it kind of ties all of this together in a way because every single one of these things adds up and makes you feel more and more alone. So for number 5, I hate to end on a depressing note, and I'm not really trying to. I just feel like this ties everything together. RSD and struggles with emotional regulation. I would say RSD, it is so mind-blowing to me that this is not in the DSM yet. It is mind-boggling. And like even like a lot of therapists don't consider this to be a real thing yet, you know? I think it's weird just because RSD has been one of the like most debilitating things I've dealt with in my life. For the longest time, I thought it was borderline. They share some traits. It's very, very intense. It's nowhere near as bad now. But the thing is, when I was a teenager, a big part of the reason why I couldn't like socialize or focus on the conversations is I was just so emotionally sensitive and easily overwhelmed. Like if I was talking to somebody and I even got like the slightest hint that they were judging me, whether that be for like the way that I talk or just anything about me, I would become so overwhelmed that I felt like I had to hide in a corner. It like makes me uncomfortable to think about to a certain extent just because of how bad it was when I was a child. It made it really impossible to talk to people just because I was so sensitive to any kind of rejection. It's like if I was anything other than like the image that I thought I needed to portray myself as, I would break down and it would knock me out for weeks. Freshman, sophomore year of high school, there were many times that like we would go on break for summer and I would I guess feel like myself again. And then I would have like one awkward interaction with somebody in public. It would just ruin the rest of my month. You know, I'm still a very sensitive person. I still am. But back then it was to such a degree that I was dysfunctional, like completely dysfunctional. Like I didn't work a job until I was 20, and I struggled with that so much to where like there were many days that I just had to leave early or call out. And even now, like I still have to be careful about what jobs I choose. I can't be around people too long. Like the RSD, just like I don't go into a social situation feeling insecure. You know, if I'm alone, I can have as much self-confidence as I want. But I think just because of the years of growing up feeling so different, it definitely conditions something in you. It really does. I mean, you could call it trauma. I mean, it basically is. It's like the second you go into a social situation, it's like that. It just like your brain, like your mental state just completely changes. And that's something that I'm still working through and trying to sort out. Man, I think RSD, out of everything that I've dealt with in terms of ADHD, has for sure caused me the most amount of problems in my life. It's definitely hurt relationships because a lot of the time, like that RSD being triggered so easily, it can sometimes turn into almost like a resentment, like projecting just because I'm so overwhelmed. For all of us that have dealt with a lot of these issues, because I think ADHD, I know a lot of people don't like to use words like severe or mild when it comes to it, because it is like a neurotype at the end of the day. But for me personally, I feel like I have the right to use those words for myself. And I would definitely say that I have severe ADHD. And I think a big part of the social struggles and the RSD being so bad is just feeling like I can't really relate to that many people, because it seems like the term ADHD, and I'm not trying to downplay anyone else's experience, but it feels like the term is used so lightly a lot of the time that the severity of our experiences just doesn't feel as real or valid, if you know what I mean. And I've talked to a lot of people with ASD that feel the same way nowadays, just because it's such a commonly used term. And it gets to the point, too, where so many people don't even think ADHD is real, you know? Like, just because it's been used too lightly, you know what I mean? So those of us that have dealt with issues relating to it so severe to the point where it's hard to function, it's just like we don't feel like we're represented or noticed, I guess. So I'm going to add a number 6 because this just came to mind, and I would like to end this video off on a less sad note. Sensory issues too. I would say that definitely does impact my ability to socialize, at least. And it kind of ties in with struggles with regulating emotions, just being so easily overstimulated by everything. Like being in social situations, like people will talk to me and it's just like, oh, it's like my head's like buzzing. Like I'm so like overstimulated and overwhelmed that I don't really know what to say. That's made 10 times worse when there's a lot of people around, like especially in high school when you're like given the ability to sit wherever you want. I still remember, like, before I had a friend group in high school, just like the feeling of like walking around the lunchroom and just like not having any clue what to do, because if I wasn't overstimulated, maybe I could like go up to a group of people and talk to them. Yeah, I really do hope this helped people feel less alone, because again, like a lot of this stuff I've just not heard anyone talk about. So I think it is important to put out there, just not only to make people feel less alone, but just to kind of like spread awareness that ADHD is not just lacking the ability to focus and lacking impulse control. It is so much more than that. And I want people to understand that, you know, because I really do want people to start taking ADHD more seriously, because again, I just feel like it's just used too lightly. And yeah, thank you all for watching.